When you reach your 80s, nobody prepares you for certain mistakes. Not the mistakes you make when you're young, not the mistakes you make when you're careless, but the mistakes that arrive when you believe you've finally learned how to protect your peace. My name is Margaret. I am 82 years old, and I made a mistake that almost destroyed the peace I spent years rebuilding after loss. What makes this mistake dangerous is that it doesn't look like a mistake at first. It looks like happiness. It feels like companionship. It feels like someone finally seeing you again after years of feeling invisible. And that is exactly why so many older women fall into the same trap. If you are in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, what I'm about to share may save you from making the same mistake. Because by the time you realize what is happening, you may already have given away something precious, your peace. At my age, people often ask me the same question, whether I'm standing in line at the pharmacy, sitting in church, or shopping for groceries. Margaret, don't you get lonely? Wouldn't it be nice to have someone in your life again? At first, those questions sound caring. They sound loving. But after hearing them enough times, they begin to plant doubt inside your heart. You start wondering if your peaceful life is actually empty. You start questioning a happiness that never needed to be questioned. And that is where my mistake began. 3 years ago, when I was 79 years old, I listened. I opened a door that had been closed for a very long time. I allowed someone into a life that had finally become calm. And today, I want to tell you something most people never admit. I have never felt more anxious, more exhausted, or more disconnected from myself than I did during that relationship. But it didn't begin badly. It never does. Let me take you back for a moment. My husband passed away when I was 70 years old. We had spent more than 40 years together. And when he was gone, the silence inside my house felt unbearable. I would sit alone in the living room for hours. Sometimes I would stare at the television without turning it on. Sometimes I would walk into the kitchen and forget why I was there. I wasn't living. I was surviving memories. The grief was heavy, so heavy that some mornings I didn't want to leave my bed. But here's something nobody tells you. Grief changes. It softens. It stops shouting and starts whispering. And in that quiet space, something unexpected can begin to grow. Little by little, I started rebuilding my life, a life that belonged to me, a life built on peace. And for a while, I truly believed nothing could take that peace away. I was wrong. I started waking up at 5:30 every morning, the same time, every single day. I would make myself a cup of tea and sit by the kitchen window before the sun came up. No television, no phone, no noise. Just the sound of birds outside and my own thoughts. That hour became sacred to me. It was the one part of the day that belonged entirely to me. After spending most of my life caring for other people, raising children, supporting my husband, and putting everyone else's needs before my own, I had finally discovered something precious: peace. And peace is a strange thing. Most people spend their entire lives chasing happiness. But when you reach your 80s, you realize that peace is worth far more. Happiness comes and goes. Peace stays. Over time, I created a simple life that made me feel whole again. I started reading books I had postponed for years. I planted flowers in my garden. I baked when I felt like baking. I visited friends when I wanted company. And when I wanted silence, I enjoyed that too. By the time I turned 78, I wasn't lonely. I was stable. I was comfortable. I was finally learning how to enjoy my own company. But the world doesn't always understand a woman who is content on her own. My daughter worried about me. My friends worried about me. Even people who barely knew me worried about me. They would look at me with sympathy and say, "Margaret, you deserve someone. You shouldn't spend the rest of your life alone. Everyone needs companionship." And perhaps they meant well. Perhaps they genuinely cared. But here's the truth nobody talks about. Not every connection brings peace. Some connections take it away. Then came the suggestions, the introductions, the gentle pressure. You should meet him. He's a wonderful man. You two would get along perfectly. At first I laughed. I wasn't interested. My life felt complete. But after hearing those suggestions again and again, something inside me started to change. A small doubt appeared. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was missing something. Maybe peace wasn't enough. And that's how the trap begins. Not with loneliness, but with doubt. Eventually, I agreed to meet him. Just once. Just a cup of coffee. Nothing serious. At least, that's what I told myself. And honestly, it felt nice. He was kind. He listened carefully when I spoke. He made me laugh. Most importantly, he made me feel noticed. And after years of living quietly, that feeling can be incredibly powerful. Because deep inside, all of us want to feel seen. One coffee became two. Two became three. And before I realized what was happening, I was in a relationship again. My family was delighted. My friends were happy. Everyone believed I had found happiness. And for a short while, I believed it too. But what nobody could see was what was slowly happening underneath the surface. Because the biggest mistakes in life rarely arrive all at once. They arrive quietly, one small compromise at a time. And I had no idea what it was about to cost me. The real problem didn't begin with one big argument. It didn't begin with betrayal. It didn't begin with anything dramatic. That's what made it so difficult to recognize. It started with small things, very small things, the kind of things most people would never notice. Before I met him, my phone spent most of the day sitting on the kitchen counter. Sometimes hours would pass before I looked at it. I enjoyed that freedom. I enjoyed being unreachable. But after he entered my life, everything changed. There were morning messages, afternoon phone calls, evening conversations. And if I didn't respond quickly enough, there were questions. Is everything all right? Why didn't you answer? Were you busy? At first, it seemed harmless, even caring. But slowly I noticed something. My attention no longer belonged to me. My days no longer belonged to me. Instead of living my life, I was constantly responding to someone else's expectations. And that's when I learned something important. Freedom is quiet. Control is constant. Then came the social events, the dinners, the gatherings, the endless plans. At this stage of life, energy becomes one of your most valuable possessions. When you're young, you rarely think about it, but when you're 82 years old, every bit of energy matters. I had spent years creating a rhythm that worked for me. Quiet mornings, peaceful afternoons, simple evenings. A life that felt balanced, a life that felt safe. But his rhythm was different. He always wanted to be doing something, going somewhere, meeting someone, planning the next event. And every time I said I needed rest, I felt guilty, as though choosing peace meant I was wasting life. So I kept saying yes. Yes to dinners, yes to outings, yes to invitations, yes when I wanted to say no. And every one of those yeses cost me something. A little more energy, a little more patience, a little more peace. The hardest part was that nobody could see it. From the outside, everything looked wonderful. People smiled when they saw us together. They told me how happy I looked. They told me how lucky I was. But inside, I was becoming exhausted. I was performing happiness, not living it. Then came something even more difficult, the financial pressure. Not because he demanded anything, but because relationships at this stage of life often come with expectations. Restaurant meals, weekend trips, birthday gifts, holiday plans. Little expenses that seem insignificant at first, but over time they add up. I had spent decades building financial security. Decades making careful decisions, decades preparing for these later years, and suddenly I found myself lying awake at night doing calculations in my head, wondering if I was spending too much, wondering if I was making wise choices, wondering why I felt anxious again after working so hard to create a peaceful life. And one evening, sitting alone in my living room, I finally asked myself a question I had been avoiding for months. Why am I so tired? Not physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Why did a relationship that was supposed to bring happiness leave me feeling so drained? The answer frightened me, because deep down, I already knew it. I wasn't protecting my peace anymore. I was sacrificing it. And little by little, I was losing the life I had worked so hard to rebuild after my husband's passing. But the biggest realization was still waiting for me, and when it finally arrived, it changed everything. The moment of truth came on an ordinary morning. There was nothing special about that day. No argument, no dramatic event, no heartbreaking conversation. Just a quiet morning, the kind of morning I had always loved. I woke up before sunrise, just as I always did. I walked into the kitchen and reached for my favorite teacup. And then I stopped. For a moment, I simply stood there, looking around my own home. And suddenly, a thought entered my mind that I could not ignore. I don't feel like myself anymore. The realization hit me harder than I expected, because it was true. Somewhere along the way, I had slowly stopped living the life that brought me peace. My schedule no longer felt like mine. My energy no longer felt like mine. Even my home no longer felt completely mine. Without realizing it, I had begun arranging my life around someone else's needs, someone else's habits, someone else's expectations. And in the process, I had abandoned myself. Not all at once, not dramatically, just little by little, day after day, compromise after compromise. Until one morning, I could barely recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. And that frightened me more than loneliness ever could, because loneliness is painful, but losing yourself is devastating. That morning, I sat quietly at my kitchen table for a long time. No television, no phone, no distractions, just silence. And in that silence, I finally heard the truth. The relationship wasn't making my life better. It was making me smaller. It wasn't adding peace. It was taking peace away. And for the first time in months, I stopped worrying about disappointing everyone else. I started thinking about what I needed, what my heart needed, what my remaining years deserved. 2 days later, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I ended the relationship. There were tears. There was guilt. There were people who didn't understand. Some said I was making a mistake. Others told me I would regret it. But deep inside, I knew something they didn't. I wasn't walking away from happiness. I was returning to myself. After he left, the house became quiet again. I sat in my favorite chair by the window. I turned everything off, and I listened. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. It didn't feel empty. It didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom. It felt like peace. It felt like coming home after being lost for a very long time. And that was the day I learned one of the most important lessons of my entire life. Loneliness is not the absence of people. Loneliness is the absence of yourself. And solitude is not emptiness. Solitude is ownership. It is knowing that your time belongs to you, your energy belongs to you, your choices belong to you. Today, at 82 years old, I spend many hours alone. But I am not lonely. I am grateful. I am peaceful. I am surrounded by memories, by books, by small projects, by quiet mornings and gentle evenings. Most importantly, I am surrounded by myself, and that is enough. So if you are watching this today, I want to leave you with one simple question. Are you truly lonely, or have you finally found the peace that so many people spend their entire lives searching for? Think carefully before you answer, because sometimes the greatest blessing in life is not finding someone else. Sometimes it is finally finding yourself. Thank you for listening, and if this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts below. I read every comment. Take care of yourself, protect your peace, and never forget how valuable it truly is. Margaret, 82 years old.